Hello, good evening.
Good evening, madam.
Yes, good evening to you. Right, so did you manage to complete everything up to day 4, unit 4, day 4? Today, I think we have to start a new unit, that is unit 5, day 1 of unit 5. So if you haven't finished any of the self-study tasks or any exercises or activities connected to unit 4 up to unit 4, please do try and complete them before we start with the new unit, right? So today we will be handling unit 5. Unit 5 is all about the different perspectives of grammar. We are not talking about how to teach grammar over here. It focuses on the different attitudes or maybe the different views that were held regarding grammar time to time. That means basically starting from the late 17th century up to this day, what were the different views that were held related to learning a language and especially related to grammar of the language. So that is what we are going to focus and discuss today in Unit 5, right? So look at the title, Different Perspectives of Grammar, which we will be focusing on the structural viewpoint connected to grammar. How did the structuralist view grammar and what was their notion about learning a language? Then we have the prescriptive viewpoint of grammar. What is that all about? And then the descriptive grammar, and the last one, functional. So this is how the view related to grammar got developed. Right, so we have already studied different methods, like that of traditional grammar translation method, immersion method. Likewise, we have studied so many methods that can be utilized in the classroom teaching. So those methods emerged in different points of time. Likewise, when it comes to the view related to the grammar of English language, these are the predominant viewpoints that education is held. Then under functional grammar, different language functions become the primary focus. Thereby, we will be focusing on the different language functions that have to be taught. Right. Read. Read. Different perspectives of language learning, right? So when it comes to learning a second or maybe a foreign language, what are the different viewpoints people hold related to language learning? And when it comes to language learning, mostly it gets related to learning the grammar of that particular language, right? So that is why we focus this language, different perspectives of grammar. Time to time, different schools of thought have emerged in relation to language and its grammar. At each of these points, linguists have viewed the usage of language and its grammar differently. So see, when it comes to learning a language, you can't separate the grammatical component of the language from that of the language. They are not focusing much on the other skills, but definitely whoever learns the language, they are very fond of learning the grammar of that language. So from early 17th century also, that was how people like to learn the language. Even today, it's no different. The following are some of them. So the following are some of the different schools of thought that people had in relation to learning a second or a foreign language. First one is the structural viewpoint of language learning. Then comes the prescriptive viewpoint of language learning, descriptive viewpoint, and last of all, the functional viewpoint of language learning. Right? Today, it's more of learning the language from a functional point of view. That means learning the grammar of a language, not for anything else, but to perform the basic communicative functions. Right? So that is why, or that is how language is learned today. When you look at each of these different viewpoints, you will understand the difference between each one of these. Read structural grammar or structural point of view of language learning. Always remember, when you come across the term structural or maybe structures, it gets related to grammar, the different grammatical structures that are found in the language. It can be a prepositional phrase, it can be an article, definite or indefinite article, or maybe a verb, any kind of compound or complex sentence. All those are identified as language structures. So when we talk about structural grammar, what are we actually focusing at? Learning the structures, the different grammatical structures of that particular language. It starts from the structure. For example, the indefinite article and. We tend to explain when to use the indefinite article and an to the child. That is known to be the tiniest grammatical structure that the child comes across or he learns for the first time. Similarly, when to use the article that is also a structure. Conjunctions, and, but, although, though, since, right? So all grammatical components are referred to as structure, different structures. So under structural grammar, what is happening? The learner is made to learn the grammar of the language through which he thinks or he intends to learn the language. They are not interested in learning the reading skill or listening skill or trying to speak out the language. Those are not the concerns. They believe by learning the grammar of the language, they will be able to learn the language. They will be able to use both, learn and use. Right? Now let's read and see how structural grammar or the structural viewpoint is working in learning a language. The structural approach is an approach that focuses on the learner mastering the patterns of the sentence. right? So patterns of the sentence of the structures. It can be subject verb. He ran. That is a sentence pattern. It can be SVO. Subject, verb, object. Mother made a cake. Right? So likewise, now they have just mentioned it as the patterns of the sentence, but this is not the only that is learned by the learners. Like these, there are multiple structures that are focused under structural approach. It presents the idea of structures, which are the different arrangements of words in an acceptable style or order. So just imagine if you want to learn the entire grammatical structures of a language, the number of days or the duration that the child needs to master the language. It's quite lengthy. You can't make him learn all these structures within a year or two. It takes a very lengthy period of time. So what are they doing? They are arranging these different arrangements, different structures in an acceptable order or style, starting from the tiniest one, easiest one. Gradually, the difficulty level gets increased. In grade 2, grade 3, grade 7, grade 10, likewise, they increase the difficulty level of the structures and present it to the learners. Right? So that is the structural grammar. When you learn the language from a structural approach, this is how language learning takes place. Analyzing the written and spoken forms of language, focusing on the relationship among elements in a sentence. Right? So the relationship of elements in a sentence, you have the subject, you have it. Then within the predicate, we have the verb. It can be the object, or maybe any other connectives, conjunctions, connectives. Likewise, structuralists, they tend to analyze each and every part of the sentence and try to present it in a very feasible manner. Structuralist view, the best way to study a language is as a systematic structure. So this is the most important line that you need to remember. This is the viewpoint of the structural grammar. If you want to study a language, you don't need to think of the vocabulary of that language. You don't need to think about listening or speaking that language. All you have to do is to learn the different grammatical structures that are there in that language. Through that, they believe that a person can learn the language. Whether it's right or wrong is something else. It's secondary. But this is the notion that structuralists, and even today, when it comes to structural grammar, this is the notion that the structuralists or people who are utilizing this approach hold. Right? So systematic study of the grammatical structure leads to studying the language. This view can be considered as an extension of the grammar translation method, where only easy concepts of grammar were presented. So structural grammar directly gets related to the GTM. Remember that we learned about different methods: grammar translation method, then direct method, audiolingual method. If you remember right, we learnt about multiple methods. This one is known to be the oldest one, the traditional one, oldest one that was used to teach language. Right? So structural grammarians, they believe using the GTM method, language can be learned. So what are they actually teaching? The grammar rules and how to use those rules in reading, or maybe mostly in writing, in developing the writing skills. The different arrangements or patterns of words are called structures. Right? So it can be an adjective, it can be an adverb, it can be a phrase or a clause, if clause, or something else, compound complex sentence. All those are arrangements or patterns. They are identified. Another word for them is structures. It is based on the assumptions, belief, that language can be best learned through a scientific selection and grading of the structures or patterns of sentences. So this is what they believe. All the different structures, grammatical structures that are found in that language, those should be graded. First, there should be a selection done, and then they should be graded according to the level of the learner. For a grade 2 student, you can't expect him to learn the type 2 if clause. That is way above his standard. Thereby, you have to produce, or you have to teach him a structure that is relatively, it correlates to his language level. Right? So, first of all, correct selection should be done with regard to the structures that are available in the language. Then they should be graded according to the language level of the learner and introduced gradually, step by step. The child has to learn all these structures. At the end of the learning process, they assumed that the person will be able to use the language. See, structuralism or structural approach focuses on careful and gradual grading of structural difficulty. The difficulty level of the structures are gradually and very carefully graded. Graded structures would be taught progressively and always in context. Contextualization becomes an integral part of structuralism. Just you can't plainly present the structures. It has to be done with a picture or maybe with clip. If you are teaching tenses, you can utilize timelines, or else any other audio or any other kind of teaching aid should be used to present the grammatical structure. Words are used in particular order to convey their sense and meaning. The structures, or it can be a single, they are used in an order along with examples, situations to convey their meaning. In this way, structures are the tools of language. So this is the belief. When you learn the structure, in other words, you learn the language. And should not be confused with sentences, right? So you can learn some basic simple structures like that of these, that is, or maybe several pronouns, right? All those are part and parcel of structures. Right, so before we look at the structural syllabus, Just go once again and try to tell me anything that is relevant. So what is structural approach all about? What are they trying to teach under structural approach of grammar?
How sentences are formed based on observable patterns of words.
Right. How sentences are formed under using observable patterns. So what are the patterns? Just give me any pattern, language pattern or grammatical structure that is there in English. Just any example of a sentence pattern or any other grammatical structure. Think of any grammatical component, forget about the word structure. Think of any grammatical component that is there in English. For example, prepositions. It's something to do with grammar. Then what else? Prefix, suffix.
Articles.
Articles. Pronouns. Any other grammatical component?
Adjectives.
Adjectives, yeah.
Adverbs.
Adverbs. Compound. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. I can't follow you. It's not clear enough. Put it in box. If clause, reported speech, right? All those are grammatical structures. Even verbs, past tense, past participle, right? All those form different examples. All those are different examples for structures that are used in English. So under structural, what are they aiming to teach? What are they aiming to teach? Look at this. What is it?
Patterns of the sentences.
Different patterns of the sentence, right? So sentence means don't just focus only on the different sentence types. It doesn't mean that they are only focusing on teaching subject, verb, object, subject, verb, likewise sentence patterns. They are also included, but more than that, they intend teaching several structures related to grammar. Tell me the name of a method that is utilized to teach structural approach or maybe conduct lessons in structural approach. What is the main method, classroom method that is used to teach structural approach? It's there in the screen. Read and tell me.
Systematic structure.
No. I mean,
Separate style.
what is it? a classroom method that we use to present these structures and then elaborate, give examples, and make them write, read, and learn. What is that method? It's given over here in the towards the end of the slide.
Structuralist view.
No. That is not a method like that of audiolingual, direct method, or maybe immersion method, total physical response. Likewise, we learn so many methods. One of those methods.
Grammar translation method.
Grammar translation method, right? So this is the method that they are utilizing to present and teach these structures in the classroom, right? So you need to remember one thing very clearly. When we talk about the structural approach or structural grammar or perspective of language, structural perspective of language teaching, always remember language is taught through teaching grammar. Forget about all the other skills. They tend to teach language through grammar. So through grammar means what are they teaching in grammar? The basic structures of the language. Under grammar, they tend to teach the structures of grammar. So is it done just randomly? How are they trying to teach those structures or maybe introduce those structures to the learners? Look at the slide and tell me, how are they doing that? How are the structures presented to the child? Read the second bullet, this one.
With pictures.
Okay, fine. They are presenting it along with pictures, but even before presenting the structure, what is happening? What has to be done? Read this.
Grade.
They are graded. So if you want to grade, first what should you do? Read this.
Scientific selection.
Right. So the structures, there are multiple structures. For example, if there are 400 structures, you need to know which structure should be presented to which grade of learners. Thereby, selection of structures become very important. So they are teaching grammar in a very scientific manner. That means by selecting the age relevant or maybe the most appropriate structure to the level of the learner and grading them according to the difficulty level or according to the appropriate to the set of appropriate learners, right? So structure are not randomly taught. Whatever that you like to teach, you can't just pick and choose and teach them. That is not allowed. There is a process of selection involved, and soon after selection, they tend to grade those structures according to the difficulty, structural difficulty level. Afterwards only, they are taught to the appropriate, right? So you have to remember those very clearly. From the structural point of view, how language is learned. Basically, the grammar, through the grammar of the language, they believed the person or the learner can learn the entire language. Look at the structural syllabus. If structural syllabus is used in the classroom to teach language, First of all, it will focus on teaching, see, language system, which consists of a set of grammatical rules. The syllabus will tend to focus on teaching a set of grammatical rules. It can be how past tense is formed, how irregular past tense and regular past tense verbs are, or maybe something to do with the other tenses, the structure of other tenses, present perfect, past perfect, right? So under structural syllabus, basically the grammatical rules become the prime focus. Learning a language means learning these rules and applying them to practical language. Not just learning and keeping quiet, they should be able to use it in a very minimal way, mostly for writing purpose. They don't focus more on speaking, but it's more towards writing purpose. Using the rule to produce written language. That is one feature of the structural syllabus. Teaching grammatical rules. Then comes the next one. Syllabus input is selected and graded according to grammatical notions of simplicity and complexity. Already we saw it. You can't just randomly pick and choose any structure and teach. The syllabus has to be selected. That means the structure in syllabus, all those structures have to be selected and graded appropriately based upon the difficulty level, or according to the difficulty level. These grammatical structures should be graded. So if you take a structural syllabus and see, you will find the very easiest grammatical components coming first. Afterwards, the structures that are taught will be the difficult ones. Then the third feature of structural syllabus is, see, this type of syllabus maintains that it is easier for students to learn a language if they are exposed to one part of grammatical at a time. One part, focusing or teaching one aspect of the grammar at a time. You don't tend to teach past tense, present continuous tense, or maybe past tense and adjectives combined. Teacher has to take up one grammatical structure, either past tense or maybe adjectives, and teach. Right? So these are some features that are exercised or that are used when structural syllabus is implemented in the classroom. First of all, grammar rules are taught, and one component at a time. Any one rule, that is one point, grammatical point, becomes the focus. And also, when arranging syllabus, there should be a very strict order maintained related to the grading and selection. Read these objectives of the structural syllabus. Learning a target language means learning to master the grammar rules of that language, right? So that is what structural viewpoint is all about. Ultimately, using these 4 different perspectives, the ultimate aim is to promote language learning in the learner. But when it comes to the first one, structural approach, how is that learning taking place? By making them to learn the grammatical component of the language. right? So that is what is a code in this objective. Learning the language means mastering the grammar rules of that language. Only that much. They are not bothered about anything additional. In addition, it is also expected that the students will learn adequate basic vocabulary. Basic vocabulary is not the prime focus, but when you contextualize the grammar rules, when you use examples, situations, automatically vocabulary too becomes a part. They will come to know certain words. Then you have the content of structural syllabus, a list of linguistic structures. That means it can be any kind of language structure, grammatical structure. The items on each list are arranged in order. The structures are ordered, showing which are to be taught first, which is second, and so on. You take grammar books like that of Brighter Grammar, Grammar, or any other grammar book. All the grammar books, they follow the structural approach. Go through the content page. You will definitely find the structures being very systematically arranged. Why? That is one of the features or the guiding principles of the structural approach. See, this is just a sample. More or less, when you go through the content page of a structural approach grammar book, you will find the syllabus somewhat similar to this, right? Not the exact ones, but more or less the format or the layout will be same. Then we come towards the next viewpoint of learning a language, which is known to be prescriptive grammar, right? Earlier one was structural approach. Now, under different perspectives of grammar, we focus on prescriptive grammar. Read what prescriptive grammar has to offer. The term prescriptive itself echoes the meaning of having some kind of a very tightened approach, right? It's not something very, how can I put it? Lenient or something that is very much relaxed. Instead of that, prescriptive means you need to adhere towards several rules and regulations, right? So prescriptive grammar is basically using very formal language in both speech and writing, right? So that is the point of prescriptive grammar. Any person who learns the language based upon the prescriptive viewpoint, he is expected to use the language very accurately. It can be in terms of speaking the language, or it can be in terms of writing the language. There is no room for a person to use informal kind of a language, even though it communicate the meaning using informal or slang kind of language that is not approved by the prescriptive grammar. Right? So see, prescriptive grammar is essential as it helps people use formal English in both speech and writing. Mostly, it gets related to a native context. That means when natives use the language, it's more towards the prescriptive grammar notion. They tend to use very formal and accurate language in communication. The prescriptive grammar had its introduction in the 18th century with the notion of having a standard language to determine people's social position standards through the discourse they use. So, you know, before the invention of printing press, there were so many different dialects of language of English used. Nobody had the opportunity of printing any books or any other kind of literature. Therefore, they freely used different dialects of language, and all those dialects were accepted. But in the 18th century, soon after, not in 18th century, even before that, when they invented the printing press and started to print books, they had the need to have a standard language. You can't print a book in different dialects. It's very difficult for them to print all the books in different dialects, or maybe to utilize different dialects for legal purposes. Thereby, they had the necessity of having a standard version of language. They had the necessity to have a standard version of the language. That is where prescriptive grammar came into existence. So if they are to have a standard version of the language, that standard version, it should consist of formal English. So that is how prescriptive grammar came into the scene. Right? So those of them who were able to use the standard formal English in different contexts, it can be in speech or it can be in writing, those people, they were considered to be in the higher social position than that of the others. They were considered to be in a better social class than that of the others who could not use formal English in both speaking and writing. Right? So in other words, prescriptive grammar, it functioned as a tool to bring about social class divisions. Right? So they didn't intend to do that, but as it got developed, that kind of a social strata or maybe a social class division emerged in the West. Right? So you have to understand what prescriptive grammar is and the background in which it got developed. So mostly it gets related to the native speakers, to the context of the native speakers. Non-native speakers, they were not that much affected by the prescriptive grammar. See, it advocates how to use the English language, what forms of language people should utilize, and what functions do those forms serve. So it was very precise. They expected to use accurate language. Language accuracy was very well focused under prescriptive grammar. Even learning, when the children are taught the language, they expected to teach accurate grammar accurate vocabulary, usage, everything. Helps to streamline one's words and make one's prose more elegant, more appealing, best fitting the situation, assigning the real native flavor. Right? So the flag that they held high was native English. English should be used in a very native context where they cannot afford to use wrong language. Then you are given an example. See, from the point of view of a native speaker in English, speakers should not use the passive voice in the following manner. Now, when it comes to mentioning about a meeting that was held by a university or maybe by a particular person attached to a particular faculty or something. Now, you can't use this kind of a structure. The meeting was held by the university. From a native's point of view, it was not accepted or it was less accepted. He considered it to be something inferior. But in a non-native context, it's fine. Since it is communicating the meaning, it's acceptable. But under prescriptive grammar, this will not be approved. Right? So see the structure that they are using. The university held the meeting. Right? Not in the passive form. Right? So likewise, very subtle differences or very minute kind of a consideration was given under prescriptive grammar. Read the rest of it. Another example is given. Go through it. It is rigidly rule-governed, relating to the norms and practices that should or should not be observed in the usage of language. Right? So remember that it focuses on rules and does not permit using any unacceptable forms of language. Emphasizes on correct and incorrect or right wrong language. Seek to explain the knowledge of the language that guides people's everyday use of language, regardless of its usage. So they are not much bothered about the usage of language, but more than that, under prescriptive grammar, they expected the person to know, to have a complete knowledge of the system of language. It can be something to do with phonological system or morphological system. Those knowledge related to the pieces of knowledge connected to the entire system of language was expected to be learned by the person. More emphasis was given on the knowledge of the language than how it has to be used. Rules overtly taught, that is, grammar is separately taught, providing ample exercises to ensure accuracy. Right, so that is all about prescriptive grammar. Go through it once again quickly and tell me something about it, whatever that comes to your mind. What are they expecting to learn under prescriptive viewpoint? What are they expecting the learner to learn, or how are they expecting the learner to learn the language under prescriptive point of view? Under structural approach, we saw it's basically the structures of grammar are taught and learned. What about this thing?
is about learning the rules of how language should be used.
Okay, learning how language should be used. So you can use language either formally or informally. What are they favoring? Which kind of usage is favored?
Real native flavor.
Sorry, real?
Native flavor.
Okay, when you are using the language similar to that of a speaker, do you think you're using it in a very formal manner, or do you think you're using it in a very informal manner? If you are using any language like that of a native, is it the formal language that is being used or informal language? Which kind of a language is practiced more by the natives?
Informal.
No, they don't. Natives don't use more of formal, informal language. It's more of formal language, right? So you observe very closely. It doesn't mean that they don't use informal language at all. They use it, but mostly the language that they use is more
Pres-
towards a high standard of formality. Okay, prescriptive grammar then favors using native-like formal language. What else? Give me some other thing that is connected to this approach. Why did it emerge? What made this prescriptive grammar learning come or become a part of the learning process? Tell me something about the background that made it become an important approach today. Not today. Read this part of it and tell me. Not the third, second one, I'm sorry, the second part of it and tell me. Any kind of historical events that had an impact on the prescriptive grammar point of view? I mean, it's there, but when I explained it, I told you emergence of something brought this approach to the forefront, or due to that particular issue, this became more popular. What was it? Standard language is used for which purpose? For several purposes it's used, but mostly for which purpose was it used in late 17th centuries?
Determine people's social position.
That is, social profession is determined by focusing on how they are using the standard language. But even before that, I told you different dialects were used, but ultimately they shifted towards using the standard language. For what purpose? To publish books, mainly with the invention of the printing machine or printing press, the standard language came to the forefront. It is from there the concept of prescriptive grammar emerged. If they did not have the opportunity of printing books or any other literature, they might not have considered using the standard language very often. Right? So all these social positions or social classes, all those hassles would not have emerged. So prescriptive grammar was born due to the introduction or the usage of standard language. Why did this standard language using it became important? Due to the invention of the printing press, right? When they started to print literature and books. Right, so this is about prescriptive grammar, where a person is required to learn the language to the level of a native speaker. The ability to use the language just like that of a native speaker. Under this approach, no opportunity is for using the language in a wrong manner. It has to be correctly and accurately used. Then comes descriptive grammar, right? So we talked about the prescriptive where formal language was used. The purpose was focusing more on accuracy of grammar and grammar accuracy of the language used. All those were connected to prescriptive grammar. Now comes descriptive grammar, which is right the opposite of what we saw over there. Right? It was quite a very rigid kind of an approach under prescriptive grammar. Here you have a very lenient approach towards grammar. They are not expected to use the language in a very elegant manner, but they are permitted to use the grammar in a very relaxed manner where you can communicate the meaning. Go through it. Descriptive approach of language learning. Describes how language is used by its speech community. Right? So it doesn't advocate how the speech community should use the language. It is not doing any of that. It just describes how the language is used by the speech community. If there are 1,000 people in the speech community, all 1,000 are not going to use the language alike. They will use it in different ways. There will be ungrammatical constructions. There will be very fine grammatical constructions. Some may just use broken kind of a very minimal kind of grammar. All those are explained by descriptive grammar. Right? So you look at the sentence carefully, how language is used by its speech community. That is described under descriptive grammar. So different ways of usage is described. Does not view language based on social standards, labeling superior or inferior varieties. Right? So today we go by the Englishes. You have Canadian English, American English, New Zealand, right? So different countries have different dialects, or no, you can't say dialects, different varieties of English. Similarly, even within a country, you have the language being handled differently by different groups of people. Thereby, under descriptive grammar, they don't distinguish the standard or maybe the way how the language is used. Now here we had under prescriptive grammar social classes emerging based upon how they use the language. That led to social emergence of different social classes and also different social groups in the society. But here, it is not labeling the superior social class or people who are handling the language very perfectly are superior and the others are inferior. No such discrimination is found under descriptive grammar. So it's a very broad-minded, democratic kind of an approach. People are led to use the language that they can possibly do, right? So whatever, however that they can possibly use it, they are allowed to use in that particular manner, as long as it communicates the meaning. Acknowledges that all dialects have their own uniqueness. So one dialect is not superior to the other. And uniqueness and complexities, and therefore should be provided equal status. Of course, they will have a benchmark. The person who needs to be fluent in the language should be able to reach that benchmark. But it doesn't mean that the language used by one particular community, how they use the language is somewhat inferior to how another community or another nationality, group of people belonging to another community use the language, right? So all are given equal status. There are no rights and wrongs with language as long as it conveys ideas accurately. So this is what they are looking for. You can use the language any which ways that you want, but the basic function should be performed. What is the basic function? Conveying the meaning. What you want to express should be clearly expressed by you. At times, it can go, or you can use some ungrammatical constructions. It's fine as long as you are able to convey the meaning or put across your meaning to the listener, that is accepted. Right? So that kind of an approach is known to be descriptive approach towards language learning. Does not rigidly abide by standard usage. Besides, supports meaningful and sensible communication. Right? So no standard usage, necessity to use standard grammar is expected. But meaningful communication should be promoted. Now see, he is older than me. In terms of prescriptive grammar, this is considered to be an ill-formed sentence. He is older than I. That is how they would define the correct version or the correct structure of this sentence. But From the point of view of the descriptive grammar, this is accepted. Why? It brings out the meaning that the person intends to convey. They are better than we are. But here, under descriptive grammar, this structure is perfectly fine. Right? So that is how learning a language is viewed from a descriptive point of view. They don't emphasize on accurate usage, but they emphasize on meaningful communication. Right? So mostly when it comes to a non-native context of language, descriptive grammar is favored. Today, more than the natives, it's the non-natives who learn English. So in their context, it's always the descriptive grammar that is used or that is favored. The child has to first learn it, learn the language, familiarize himself with the language, after which maybe gradually he can move towards using the language like that of a native. Read. Rules are made according to the daily usage of the speaker. Right? So speaker can amend. Very flexible way of handling the rules are possible under descriptive grammar. It can vary according to speakers, even the pronunciation, how people pronounce words differ, right? So it is fine and it is acceptable under descriptive grammar. Not only pronunciation, grammar, even sentence structures, all those are accepted. The communication function of language is fundamental. That is very important. You can't compromise with the communication function of the language. If you can communicate meaningfully, well, you can use any kind of grammar or syntax or vocabulary. Thereby facilitates fluency more than accuracy. Right? So fluency is considered more than accuracy. Under prescriptive, it was accuracy. They were not allowed to make mistakes. They were not allowed to use incorrect language. But here, even the language is incorrect. If you are able to perform the communicative function, fine. It is accepted. Focuses on the setting, context in which language is being used, than to the rules governing. Right? So the setting or examples or the context in which people are using the language is held high than that of the grammar. So it's a very democratic kind of an approach. Due to the descriptive attitude of the notion of language learning, today we find English being used all over the world. People are free to use the language according to their own standards and requirements. Then you have the difference between descriptive and prescriptive grammar. Forget about the functional one. We didn't have a look at it yet. Go through the descriptive point of view and the prescriptive point of view. describes the rules used by people in relation to language usage, right? So different peoples can have different versions of rules. All those are accepted and they are considered to be the part of the language. Here, prescribe the rules. They dictate the rules that people should or should not use. So very rigid kind of an approach. Here, it's very flexible. Rules are acquired intuitively in the process of using the language in real life situation. Acquisition becomes important over here. More than teaching grammar, they tend to acquire the grammatical rules, not formally taught. Here, over teaching is done. Rules are formally taught at school. Non-judgmental view regarding the grammatical constructions in the language. Even if they go wrong, they are not considered to be inferior speakers or inferior structures, as long as they can communicate the meaning. That is very important. If they fail to communicate the meaning, then they will not be approved. Refers to the structure of language as a rigid one, bound to be used as it is. Under prescriptive grammar, they have well focused on using the language according to the given rule. Focuses the usage of the language from an ESL, EFL context. Irrespective of rules, they consider the language being used in more of a foreign language context. Here it's totally different. Focuses on the use of language from the point of view of a native speaker. Thereby, it has to be the correct usage, correct rules, everything. Rules are formulated based on the daily language use. So rules can get interpreted in different manner. According to how people use, the rules become flexible. Here, rules are not at all flexible. Users have to abide by the rules, right? So it's a very strict, rigid kind of an approach. And this one is a very lenient and democratic kind of an approach. Then we come towards functional grammar, which is relatively new. Soon after prescriptive, we had the descriptive grammar being used in teaching. And then now the trend is based on functional grammar. That means grammar for communication, grammar to perform language functions, learning grammar, or maybe learning a language. Grammar of a language is basically to perform the communicative functions or language functions. Practical approach to grammar. So here also grammar is being taught, but in a very practical manner. Grammar lies at the heart of communication. Learning grammar that is adequate to perform successful communication. Grammar should enable speakers and writers to represent the world, to interact with one another, and to create coherent messages. Right? So that much of a grammar, is adequate for a person to communicate, to interact, and put across his messages. A functional description of English grammar is where grammar is viewed as a communicative resource, right? So learning grammar is not for any other purpose, but just to promote communication. Functional grammar means here basically performing language functions. You know, there are different language functions: introducing, self-introduction, or requesting, suggesting, apologizing. All those are language functions, communicative functions. So learning the grammar to perform those functions. Grammar is not considered as just a system of rules, but as a means or an instrument for communication, right? So not learning the grammar just for rules' sake, but to promote communication. Learner usage, how the learner uses grammar, the rules. So the standard rule can get several interpretations based upon the learner's usage. There can be some kind of an adjustments made to the rules. That is the meaning. Grammar is for communication and communication is not for grammar, right? So that is the slogan which becomes very important. Under functional grammar, a person is learning the grammar not for not to promote language, but to promote communication. Right? Grammar is for communication and communication is not for grammar. We don't communicate to learn grammar. We learn grammar in order to perform communication, the act of communication. Then under functional grammar, we focus on expressing or performing certain language functions. Thereby, we need to know what language functions are all about. Read what language functions are all about. What are language functions? The purpose of what you are saying to fulfill your need. There will be different needs that we come across in our day-to-day life. If you are thirsty and need some water to drink, you can express it using different words or different structures. One such structure is, would you mind giving me a glass of water? I want a glass of water. That is also perfect, right? Just a glass of water. Learners who have very minimal language can express it in that way, a glass of water. So they are also, the purpose gets fulfilled. So what is language function all about? How people use the language in order to fulfill their needs. Now here, the function is polite request. Since it is mentioned as, would you mind giving me a glass of water? It becomes polite request. If you just say glass of water, you can't consider it to be a polite request, but still they are performing the function of request. Look at the second example. You have offended your friend unknowingly. You want her to forgive you. I am sorry, I beg your pardon. Now this is one way. Likewise, you can use multiple words and phrases to ask for apology. Right? So see, seeking apology is the language function. So what you need to remember in this particular slide is what is meant by language functions. We talked about functional grammar. Functional grammar is all about performing language functions. right? So in order to fulfill the language functions, we need some grammar. That grammar is known to be the functional grammar. So under functional grammar, teaching language functions become very imperative. It becomes very imperative using role plays or dialogues or any other kind of speeches. Language functions are taught. See, a list of language functions are given. Asking for opinion, self-introduction, introducing someone else, maybe your friend or maybe a neighbor, clarifying, encouraging, praising, right? All these are different language functions that fall under, mostly they get related to functional grammar. Now find 10 language functions from this grid. Quickly try to diagonally, vertically, horizontally, try to find out any 10 language functions. You need to tell me the row or the column.
Thanking the last call before the last one.
Thanking, okay, here you have thanking. 10, so one you have found out.
Next, suggesting.
Where is it?
Sixth line.
Right, suggesting.
Apologizing the last one.
Yeah.
The last.
Number 3, apologizing. Something on row 4. Look at row 4.
Agreeing.
Agreeing. Where is that? Tell me the column or the row.
Fourth.
4th one.
Yes.
4th row or column.
Column.
Yeah, okay, agree. Number 4. Yes,
Thanking.
thanking, somebody mentioned it. Here you have thanking, it's already mentioned. Thanking, apologizing, then agreeing, and one more thing you told.
Greeting.
Where is that?
1, 2, 3.
Which
Ninth
row?
row. Ninth row.
9th row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Greeting, yeah. 5. So 5 more to find. Already you have mentioned 5.
Was suggesting said, ma'am?
Yeah. Yeah. Suggesting. Good.
Thanking the last row. 10th one.
Thanking, you have already mentioned. Thank you. Agreeing also somebody mentioned. I can't remember now, but it was yeah, agreeing you mentioned. So don't repeat that. See whether you can find inviting.
Yes, the third row,
Yeah.
inviting.
Here, yes. Inviting, inviting.
Ma'am, we have praising in first row.
Yes. Praising. Yeah. So two more to find. Praising, inviting, apologizing, agreeing, thanking. Something else you mentioned, right? Suggesting. Suggesting. Greeting. Check whether you are able to find greeting.
In the fourth column, greeting.
Fourth column here.
Yeah, here. Yeah, that one.
No, this is not greeting. GRWT is not there. Green. It's there.
Ma'am, greeting is there in the 8th row, is it, ma'am? Next to the
Yeah.
A, there we have a G, and then that continues.
Greeting, right? So you have greeting over here. One more, the last one. Suggesting, did you mention? Yes. Suggesting. Disagreeing, agreeing. Diagonally or backwards. You have agree, but not ing, right? So agree is here. T comes in between.
Ma'am, sing is not a language function, no, ma'am.
Which one?
Sing, we
Sing, no, sing you can't
have
take.
sing, but I don't think that is a language function.
No. This one you mean, no, that is not a language function. Asking, answering, those kind of things, you can. Requesting, see whether you didn't hear.
Ma'am, we have advising diagonally.
Where?
It's below the I in the 3rd column, and then it goes diagonally. We have advising.
Third column, below the I, this one.
No, ma'am, 3rd column, there is I. We have an A below the I, right, ma'am? So from there, if you go right side downwards, you can find advising.
I don't find it. Yeah.
Yes.
Which
Yes,
one?
it is there.
Ma'am, I mean, we have G, N, and I. I is the 3rd column. Below I, we have an A. So from that A, if you go downwards diagonally, for the right side, you see advising.
A is here. In the third column, we can start from the third column A. Then after D,
This
next
one.
V.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Yes.
SING. Okay, advising, yeah. And look at this. Backwards, you have requesting. REQ.
Yes, ma'am.
Requesting. Right. So there are more than 10, I suppose. Apologizing, somebody told. Right, so that is the language functions. Now you have this task to be done, categorize under structural should be there, right? It's not mentioned, but you make it a point to include that as well. Now, all these are different these subtopics, they belong to different syllabus types. So it can be a part of structural syllabus or prescriptive, descriptive, or functional grammar. You can even put them under two possible types. It can come under structural as well as functional grammar, right? So you can, you are free to categorize them under each suitable topic. Just try to go through them and tell me. First one, greetings, performing greetings and social expressions like that of using good morning, good night, hello. Under which kind of viewpoint can be at this particular topic?
Functional.
Functional, yeah. Functional grammar, expressing or maybe greetings using social expressions. Okay, functional grammar. Any other thing? Prescriptive, descriptive? No, you can't. What is your name? Receptive skill, to develop a receptive skill. If you ask the question, what is your name? If you make them practice this structure, under which category can we categorize it?
Functional.
Functional, more than functional. Now, in order to get the name as a response, the child is made to ask this question. It's functional, fine, you can put it under functional, but at the same time, there is also another possibility. What is that? Structural, right? So receptive, they are practicing this structure in order to receive a particular piece of information, right? So under functional as well as structural, both are possible. They can't make any amendments to the structure. This is the structure that they are expected to follow to get the response of a particular name or maybe some kind of an information. This one, just by looking at it, you can say, what is it?
Structural.
Structural. The next one,
That is also structural, no, ma'am?
third one is structural. I am so and so. She is,
Yeah.
you are, it's structural. Third one. Fourth one, this is, that is, this is my house, that is your house, or your book. What is it?
Prescriptive.
Descriptive?
No,
No.
prescriptive.
Prescriptive. Okay. Prescriptive or structural, both. Prescriptive and structural. More than prescriptive, it's more towards structural. With this on and that you have to use is, these and those you have to use like that. So it becomes more of structural. Constructing a story based on given pictures. What kind of a,
Descriptive.
yeah. What is it?
Descriptive.
Prescriptive.
No, ma'am, I said descriptive. D.
Yeah, descriptive. It should be descriptive. Right. So based on the pictures, you can vary the vocabulary that we use, or maybe the structures that we use. Descriptive. Identify the objects in a bedroom by drawing and labeling. What kind of a grammar is taught over there? What kind of a viewpoint connected to
Functional.
functional? Right. So object identification and also labeling. Functional. This, that, we have already seen that in the fourth one. This, that, noun. This is a something. That is a something, right? So it's structural. What is that? In order to get receptive answers. This is the eighth. What is that? In order to get receptive, if you use this structure, what can it mean? Open your book, please sit down, giving commands.
Structure and function.
No, not structural. Functional. Open your books, sit down, and all functions, language functions are involved. What is this? This one is structural. Eighth one, half of the eighth one is structural. Social expressions.
Functional.
Adverbs of manner. ly.
Structural.
Descriptive or structural, both.
Structural. Yeah, structural or descriptive. Number 10.
Structural.
Structural. Nobody, nothing yet. Speeches related to different occasions. Speech
Functional.
at a wedding, at a funeral.
Functional.
Function.
Can
Relating to
that
the
not be descriptive, ma'am?
more, you can consider it to be descriptive, but when it comes to delivering a speech at an occasion, it's more towards functional, right? So depending on the different occasion, it can come under functional or else prescriptive. The language that is used matters depending on the occasion. So either prescriptive or functional. You can't use it under descriptive. I don't think it's suitable for descriptive.
Okay, ma'am.
Relating to the material composed of, that is now, if you say a bangle is made of gold, or maybe a table is made of wood. If we are to describe something, relating it to the material that is composed of,
Descriptive or structural.
not descriptive, no, more towards descriptive. Asking for information,
Functional.
Functional.
functional. Look at your self-study task. So tell me the 4 different points of view connected to grammar, learning grammar. What was the initial point of view that we saw? under the 4 perspectives of grammar, what was the first perspective of grammar that we discussed? How is grammar learned? Forgot everything. Structural point of view, right? So, quickly, what are the 4 different perspectives of language learning? Language learning means basically it gets related to learning the grammar as well. Language learning is done through learning grammar. So what are the 4 different perspectives through which language is learned combined with grammar? Structural,
Structural, descriptive, functional.
functional. Now look at your self-study task. What is structural grammar? Briefly describe it, giving examples, right? So you have to speak about learning a language through through learning its grammatical structures. That is all about structural grammar. Structural grammar means the person is learning the language by learning its grammatical structures. In the process of learning the grammatical structures, he or she has to learn the simplest structure first, starting from the simplest structure and extending towards the complex structure the learner is expected to learn. For that purpose, the structures are very systematically selected and organized, graded. Right? So selecting the structures and grading the structures become very important. And tell me one more thing that you can feature under the structural syllabus. One is you need to select and grade, and also when teaching the structure, how should it be done? If you have the snapshot, look at that and tell me. How many components or how many grammar-related topics are expected to be taught to the learners at a time? Can we introduce more than one? Yes or no?
Since we have to teach this by introducing the correct sentence structure, then we can introduce more than one, no, ma'am?
No, one at a time. Remember that. You can't introduce more than one according to accepted standard or according to the given feature or however you call it. You see, guiding principle, according to the guiding principle. Yes. Don't remember where it was. You have to teach the grammatical component in context. That is one feature. And see, look at the second one. In the syllabus, one item at a time should be focused. You can't teach more than one component at a time. For example, compound nouns and collective nouns. You can't put them together and teach, or else any 2 more concepts. Right? One concept at a time should be focused. Make use of this slide, which speaks about the guiding principles that have to be followed under structural approach when you are answering the question. First question. Discuss what prescriptive and descriptive grammar are all about by identifying the difference, right? So if you understand these 2 prescriptive and descriptive grammar properly, you will be able to highlight the differences. It's already given there. The differences are given there. Here, make use of this slide and don't put this grid and write, but you just convert it into a paragraph and highlight three differences that you can obviously find between descriptive and prescriptive grammar. What is functional descriptive grammar? That is functional grammar. Explain it a bit and say, how does it differ from descriptive grammar? Right? Functional grammar and descriptive grammar. Compare and try to find out any three differences and highlight them. So that's it. Are you in need of any slide?
No, ma'am.
You have all everything. Okay, fine. Then we will wind up the session and I'll be meeting you on next Saturday at the same time. Okay then.